Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Zombag and is from Glass Cabinet Hobbies. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page. I'll have a link in the description section of the video and also in the little card icon in the top corner of your screen. You can click that and a little pull down will come out with a link to the Kickstarter page. Go there, find out more information, more than I could possibly tell you here, and hopefully consider backing the project. Now, what is Zombag? This is a zombie-themed survival game. You and the other players are trying to field a team of survivors during the zombie apocalypse and feeding them and equipping them with weapons and trying to get them to survive not only the zombie onslaught, but possibly the other players' groups of survivors as well. The mechanism of the game is drawing tiles from a bag. These tiles could be very helpful for you, or they could be the conflict in zombie tiles that mean stuff is about to go down, and you need to accrue as much power as you possibly can in order to win the game. Let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played, then with a prototype version of the game. Let me stress that as well. What you see may change or will change in the final version of the game, but then we're going to come back. I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, I'm going to give you a brief look at Zombag. This is a competitive game for up to 6 players. The goal of the game is to have the most power amongst your field of survivors at the end of the game. The end of the game is going to occur whenever someone draws the end token from the bag, or if someone draws 2 or 3 end tokens from the bag, depending on how long you decide you want the game to be. Now, I will reiterate, this is a prototype version of the game, so some of the things that you're going to see here may change in the final version, but let me go ahead and take you through the prototype components that we have here. First, of course, you have the Zombag itself, where all the tokens are going to go at the start of the game. You have a custom D8 that has a crit symbol on it, which is going to be the crosshairs. It has the X symbol, which is very bad. We'll get to what all these things actually mean. It's going to have a -2, a -1, a 0, a 1, a 2, and a 3 on its other faces. Next, you're going to have a variety of different tokens, of different colors and such. So you have different types of survivors, and you see that they all have different colored sides to match up to different colors of weapons. Up in the top corner, the number here, which is going to be 2, is the strength of those survivors, and then down the bottom corner is their value. You have, of course, the zombies themselves, which are either going to be on their normal difficulty side or their challenging difficulty side, depending on how strong your party is, but that is their strength in the top corner. Then you have various types of weapons, and notice that they have different colors as well, the same way that the different survivors that you have different colors too. Up in the top corner of the tiles, you're going to have their strength. You have their different colors. You have their hand requirements with the hand outstretched with the different fingers showing. Then in the bottom corner, you have their value. Up in the top corner for the ranged weapons, you're going to have bullets that you need to use in order to successfully use that weapon, 1 or 2 bullets. However, you can use firearms as melee weapons by flipping them over to their other side. You have raid tokens that look like this, and there are, which I'll explain all these in a moment. You have the conflict tokens, and the one thing to note on this particular token is that there is a recycle symbol up in the top corner. Whenever you see a recycle symbol, that means that the token is going to go back into the bag. And then finally, you have food tokens and with their own value, and bullet tokens, which have either a 2 bullet side and a 1 bullet side, which means that let's say that I have to shoot a weapon that only requires 1 bullet. I can flip this token over to its 1 bullet side, and there you go. If something requires 2 bullets, I can either discard a 2 bullet token or 2 1 bullet tokens. And of course, I already mentioned it, the end token. So at the start of the game, all of the tokens are going to go back into the bag, not the die. And then each player is going to draw 7 tokens at random from the bag. I just happen to draw 7. You are only going to stick with this if you drew at least 1 survivor. If you didn't draw any survivors, you get to do a redraw. You'll also ignore any of the zombie tokens that you drew from the bag. or ends tokens, or conflict tokens. The end result being that you're going to have 7 usable tokens by the end of the starting phase. Then you go into turn order, and it is very important to assign numbers to each of the players. So if you're the start player, you might be the number 1, and then going clockwise around the table, 2, 3, 4, 5, potentially 6. And that's going to be relevant for when you get to some of the tokens in the game. But at the start of your turn, you have several different things that you can do before you take your actual action for the turn. The first thing you can do is discard food tokens in order to feed and therefore activate your survivors. So, in other words, in this random setup hand I drew, I have 1 survivor, so I'm going to go ahead and discard a food token in order to activate him. Now he's fed, and even if he were to be traded away to another player, he is still going to be considered to be fed and can be used. At this point, I can also trade items with any of the other active players and can equip any items that I have to my survivors. Now, I can equip any weapon to any survivor, but if I had a color bonus, which I don't in this particular case, then I would get a +1 to my power. But as it is, I'll just have to settle for giving this survivor this very badass-looking assault rifle. Once I get done with my start of turn stuff, then it is time to go on to my main turn action. And I have 2 different options for my main turn action. The first is to scavenge, the other is to raid. So let me talk about scavenging first. This is simply pulling 2 tokens from the bag and then resolving them. Now, if one of those happens to be the end token, that could be the end of the game. That could be us going to the end phase, and that'll be that. Now, if the tokens I pull just happen to be items or food, I just take those, or survivors, or anything that's benign, I'll just take them, and then play is going to go to the next player. However, if it was a conflict or a zombie token, like let's see if I can just grab one here, if it was one of these, or if it was one of the conflict tokens that I had showed you earlier, which I should have had handy, like so. Then you have to resolve them. So if it's a zombie, you have to fight that zombie. If it's a conflict, then you're going to have conflict with one of the other players. So first off, you decide which survivors you're going to use. It can only be survivors that have been fed and are active. And you're actually going to make one of them your leader for the combat. And remember that when you are adding up their power, you're adding up their base power together with any weapons that they have equipped, and you get a +1 if the color of the weapon matches the color of the survivor. In this case, it doesn't. So my total power is going to be 5 for this, and I'll go ahead and make him my leader. Let's say that I had actually fed these 2 before on a previous turn or at the beginning of this turn. I'll actually bring them into the mix as well. So my total power, they have no weapons, so it's just going to be a total of 8. Now, if my total strength had met or exceeded 20, I'd actually have to use the challenging side of the zombies. But in this case, it didn't, so I just have to fight a zombie or a small zombie horde that represents 9 total strength. Then at that point, I'm going to roll the die and see if I can defeat it. Now, in this case, I actually did meet or beat the strength because I got 8 + 1, so I was able to defeat the zombie. If I've defeated the zombie, it goes away, and any items that I had pulled alongside that zombie, since you pull 2 at a time, I'll gain at that point. But if the zombie wasn't defeated, I'd have to get rid of the item, and I would have to get rid of 2 value worth of items of my own, which could be really bad. If I had drawn multiple zombies, I'd have to fight against their combined total, which could be even worse. Though at least I can possibly take down 1 zombie before I go down, but if both of them can't be defeated, I have to get rid of 3 value worth of items. Now, if the token was a conflict token instead, I'd be having a fight with whatever number player is on that token. Oh, and just to backtrack for a minute, I should mention that if you roll the X, whoever you nominated as your leader for the combat is automatically killed. If you rolled the crit, you would double the combat value of your leader. Now, in a conflict with another player, you're simply comparing your total, and whoever has the higher total gets to take whatever item was pulled out with the conflict token. If you're the active player, you actually get to roll the D8 and can steal items with a value up to the number rolled. And if a crit is rolled, you can steal an active survivor from the target, regardless of the value, and otherwise it's a 3. So that all falls under scavenging, because you can get a conflict or a zombie when you do the scavenge action. The other thing you can do, however, is lead a raid. So if I have a raid token, I can go ahead and use it. You choose a leader for the raid, almost the same as you would if it was a combat, and then you're going to roll the d8, targeting another player. Now, if this would be a bad roll for me, if I rolled a -2 or a -1, the target can steal value equal to the rolled amount from me. But if I had rolled a positive 1, 2, or 3, I'd get to steal the value from the target, the total rolled value from the target in items. If I had rolled the X, that would be really bad for me. Just like with other types of combat, I would have to kill my own leader that I chose. But if I had rolled a crit, I can steal an active survivor from the target. So, in other words, it's almost like having a conflict, but just it's more one-sided in my favor, but randomly could turn against me. But in any case, if you're the active player and you didn't draw the ends token, or at least there are not enough end tokens to end the game, then play is going to proceed to the next player and they will keep going. The goal here, if you haven't noticed, just as a broad overview, is to try to pull as many useful items from the bag in order to have as many survivors and as many weapons and as possible. And also bullets in order to survive as time goes on, food in order to activate your survivors, but the main goal is to have as much power in your camp as possible, because that is essentially victory points at the end of the game. So when the end of the game is finally triggered, then every player is going to roll a d8. Whatever number comes up, you're going to add that to your total power of all of your survivors and their weapons in camp, and whoever has the highest power is going to win the game. That is Zombag. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. There are a lot of zombie games out there on the market today, but without a doubt, Zombag is one of the most unique of them because of that entire central mechanism. You may think that a zombie game needs to have a ton of miniatures and be this big, grandiose thing that takes up a lot of table on your space, but Zombag can give you the experience of a zombie game with just the tiles coming out of the bag. You pull those tiles out and it could be very good things for you, it could be very bad things for you, but no matter what, ultimately you need to survive, you need to accrue your survivors and equip them and feed them, and that is thematic to a real zombie apocalypse where you just don't know what's around the corner, but whatever you do, you just have to survive. So the whole aspect of getting the weapons, trying to match them up with the appropriate survivors who are only going to be good at what they're good at, and they can do other types of weapons, but they're better with the ones that they are accustomed to, which is thematic to some certain zombie television shows that I can think of. But having to feed them to even use them at all is a very interesting aspect, again, thematic to any kind of zombie story. And together with the fact that you can choose to be as aggressive as you want. You can raid other players by using those raid tokens as much as you possibly can. You can definitely really mess up a player by rolling well and having enough power and taking some of their stuff and possibly even their survivors as well, which is an interesting aspect of the game. Of course, it all comes down to those zombies eventually who are going to be coming upon you, and you can be very powerful and take them out very easily, but eventually if you get too much power, you represented by basically you're making too much noise, too many people are in your group, then you're going to have to deal with a larger horde, which is going to be much tougher to take out. So the game scales in that regard. But of course, if you have that much power, you're probably doing very well in the game. You just have to do your best not to lose that power to either the other players or the game itself. So there's a surprising amount of stuff going on, despite the fact that it is a very easy game to learn, a very easy game to teach. You can have it up and running very quickly, and the game plays quickly as well. And even though it is a zombie game, there is nothing that objectionable in the game as far as the artwork on the tiles or anything like that, which means that it can be a good family game as well. So if any of those things that I mentioned seem to strike a chord with you, definitely go to the official Kickstarter project page. I'll have a link in the description section of the video down below me, but also in the little card icon up in the top corner of your screen. Go to the Kickstarter project page, find out more information, and hopefully consider backing Zombag from Glass Cabinet Hobbies. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.